In this video, we're going to look at sleepwalking into control. This has happened throughout history. What is it that makes members of the public just become passive and sleepwalk into their own control systems? We're also going to take a look at compulsion loops. What are these? It's how we get into addictive behavior and how people begin to act really irrational. If either of these interest you, please stay tuned. Hello, so today's presentation is Sleepwalking into Control. The Reaching People project is focused on three things, which is how to have good conversations, how to navigate the resistance that a lot of people have when we're talking to those with different views, how to message effectively, how to really get our message to land, and how behavior works and how we're influenced. And when we understand these three things at a deeper level, our communication skills significantly increase. Today's presentation is really part A is going to look at the process of sleepwalking into control. We're really going to see like an aerial view of this. And it's really quite startling when you really understand what's going on from an aerial view, because then you can start to really do some things that will be much more effective to get what we need to get in terms of our outcome. And part B is we're going to look at this not scratching the itch, and it's really a hedonic loop. And you'll start to understand what's really driving the megalomaniacs and why they're so intent on complete control outside of these other things that are potential in terms of their ideology and other related subjects. Really, it's substance over style. We are very pressurized for time and resources. So it's really providing the key information and try and get some sort of nice graphics and visuals if we get time. The more and more I go deeper into understanding behavior, the more this quote becomes really relevant. You've got a group of people that I think most people agree on that are out to get much more control and resources than they could ever possibly need or want or should have. But there's an awful lot of people that are assisting them in that process that are not aware of what's going on. So you could effectively say they are unconscious to what they're doing. And as Carl Jung pointed out, that much of the evil in the world is due to the fact that man in general is hopelessly unconscious. When people become conscious of what's going on, they tend to change. But there's the big challenge, because you can't tell people. And I think most people realize that now. You can lead them to the conclusions, but as you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And if someone believes something different, just telling them is not going to have really much effect. So the recipe for sleepwalking into control is relatively straightforward. It's one, elicit a state of unconscious behavior, which sleepwalking is. So someone's effectively doing a behavior that they're not aware of what's going on. If you watch someone walking around the supermarket, a lot of people are effectively sleepwalking. And you provide a pathway to control and make it appealing. So effectively, people are just going to walk onto that pathway and let's walk straight into the prison. And of course, you rinse and repeat. So we're going to look at how this plays out in everyday life. So sleepwalking into control. So this is effectively how to understand behavior. There's 5 elements to it: that we have a need. The need drives the want, which drives the emotions. And then how Joe perceives things. And this slide is explained a lot in other presentations. So I just really wanted to show it here to show at a very high level what's going on. So the horse represents the unconscious drives. The Joe here represents the conscious mind. And the map represents all of the things that Joe knows to be true. The horse also has a map, or it might be one map that we're both interpreting differently. But if Joe thinks that public speaking is something he wants to do, but his unconscious mind, his unconscious horse, as it were, thinks that that's dangerous, he's not going to be able to do it, because the unconscious mind is far stronger than the conscious mind. So what we have is that Joe's perception, which is these 3 elements of his wants and his needs, will drive which pathway he will take. So whether he takes option A or option B. And it could be as simple as choosing a coffee, or choosing to comply with tyranny, or any number of things. Choice architecture, which this is just 5 elements: a need, which would trigger a want. Joe's interpretation of this, both consciously and unconsciously. Then specific pathways and then which one he chooses. If option A is comply, the people creating this will make this pathway the path of least resistance. If option B is one they don't want you to take, then they will put sludge or even barriers in here. Now, what you have is to really understand how this would work is if you walk into a field and the grass is 2 foot high and someone's already been there and walked a pathway for you, that is the pathway that you are more than likely going to take. It's the path of least resistance. And that's what generally people will take when they're unconscious, which is why so much of society is the things that they want to sell us or us to do, they make that pathway the pathway of least resistance, and they make any other pathway difficult to take. It's really, that is its core essence. So if we look at how it played out with COVID, the need was safety. So we were told that there's this disastrous virus that everyone's prone to, that created this want, these forces to do something. Then Joe's interpretation of this, okay, I've got to get away from this. I want to go to safety. Now, if somebody was to invert these pathways and the thing to safety was actually unsafe and the unsafe path was actually safety, you would get people going down the wrong pathway. And that's what you'll find, is that so much of the things in the world today, and many people have quoted on this, is that it's upside down. It's effectively inverted. So all the things that in certain things that we should be doing, we're told not to do, and all the things that we shouldn't do, we're told to do. And, you know, some people will joke that if you want to find the right thing to do, just ignore whatever the government is saying. Obviously, that's a joke, but maybe closer to reality than we realize. So this is really quite an interesting quote as well. The road to hell is paved with good intention. So what we see is a staggered nudge. So a lot of the time, each decision in isolation often seems okay or maybe the right thing to do. But when you look at it from an aerial view, you'll see that it's really this slippery path that's been designed. So if we take an example, which I think is quite relevant at the moment, which is paying at a shop. So Joe up here has a need for food, so he goes to a supermarket, and obviously he's walking around buying lots of things that he probably doesn't need because they're very clever at getting that. And then he gets to the checkout, and he's used to going to the checkout where he goes and pays and he sees a lady, etc. But they've just introduced some new tills that you can go and do it yourself. And of course, coincidentally and not by accident, they've only got one till open that has a cashier. So Joe's path of least resistance is actually just to go and do it himself. So, you know, he might have had a bad day, not wants to talk to anyone. He might be in a rush. Any number of things will get him to, you know, do this behavior. Then, of course, the next time they go, oh, they've taken away the ability to pay with cash. And obviously this sequence is for example only, and you'll see that they may have done it, you know, in verse order, etc. But you'll see that piece by piece, that Joe's built a habit of going to the till. Now he thinks, oh, it doesn't accept cash anymore, but Joe's got his credit card on him and he often pays with a card, so he's not too inconvenient, so he just goes along with it. The next time he turns up at the supermarket, now it's videoing him. And it's like, Joe is like, feels a little uneasy, but he comforts himself that, you know, he is a good person and he's not going to steal anything. And if, you know, so why should I worry? Because I'm not a thief. Oh, and these are just there because bad people are not giving these lovely shareholders the money that they asked for in exchange for the goods. So that's the rationalization to continue on his own behavior, which humans are notoriously apt at doing. And then, of course, now Joe actually has to pay by facial recognition, which is linked directly to his bank account and his credit score. Oh, it's only one more step. I'm busy, I have to work. I've got to, you know, get home and finish some work. Oh, I'll look at this later. So his unease is just rationalized. But what's effectively gone on is that, you know, boiling the frog in water step by step with these gentle nudges, by this constant not being able to be served by a person, and the path of least resistance being piece by piece, you know, restrictions taken away, etc. Joe has had his behavior moved. And then, with the supermarkets, everything's about selling product. And this was a funny meme that I saw today, is that they often put expiry dates on things that don't expire. And for the obvious reason, because a lot of people won't think about it and they would just throw it away. But this salt is 250 million years old. I'm sure an extra few months won't make much of a difference. So what you effectively have, as I think you can clearly see from the example, is that it's really a lily pad, a stepping stone. So if we look at the lockdown, it was lockdown, masks, gene therapy, regular gene therapy, digital tattoos, the next plan, and then boom, into control. So how they do this from a project planning is they work out the destination and they work backwards from it. So with the shopping, you could argue that the plan was always to have cashless, facial recognition. So that's where they start and they work backwards, one step at a time, with the nudging to be very convenient for you. And what you have is that the increment mustn't be too far, because if it's outside of someone's comfort zone, then you effectively nudge them into consciousness. So what you have is that many people are sleepwalking and there isn't a sufficient experience for them. So telling them tends to have not much effect. But if you can give them an experience that takes them just outside that comfort zone, then they tend to kick in to be conscious. And obviously not with fear, but an experience that really empowers them. So an aerial view, effectively what you've got is that a lot of people are sleepwalking, but they've made it even easier than that. It's a train. And it's a train with many, many stops, a bit like if you went to the tube or the subway and you were in London, say you wanted to get to Heathrow, you'd need to know the destination and when you're starting from, and you can't transport from one to the other. You've got to go station by station by station by station. And effectively Z, for the people pushing agendas, is complete control. People talk about the surveillance state. So what we would want to do to avoid this is know where we want to go and then work backwards. Because what you need for many people is this on-ramp. Because if you tell them the destination, it's too far into the future and it's too much for them to take. What you're really looking for is a step-by-step way to get them into the research, to get them to understand what's going on. We talk about that as an on-ramp, or a slip road on, or the first floor in the Hotel of Knowledge. But it's really the start of the journey, because when you start to see this at a deeper level, you understand a lot of the Buddhist quotes, a lot of the Zen quotes, where there's if you're facing the right way, all you need to do is walk. And obviously, if Joe's facing the right way up here, he's not facing the right way, because he's literally going to walk into a controlled state. So we need to be facing the right way before we start walking. And that's where the first thing is, we've got to get people, facing a different direction. So hopefully that begins to really make sense in that, project planning is about going to an aerial view, looking at where the destination is, and then working backwards so you can do it incrementally, step by step. And anybody that's very effective at productivity will understand this, because the thing that triggers procrastination faster than anything else are two things. It's either overwhelm or ambiguity. So what they do is they make those two things go away by having it small steps at a time and very clear labeling. And of course, a lot of these things is where you get on the train without realizing. So if you have to make a choice and you'd have to send in a letter, and a classic example was the organ donation, the donor cards for organs. There was generally, I think it was only between 10 and 30% uptake in the UK. But what they did, which is illegal in many countries, but they did it in the UK anyway, is they switched it, is that they defaulted you in and you had to write a letter to get out. So of course, the path of least resistance is to do nothing. So in fact, now I think it's something like 90% of people are now on the organ donation list. So it really is, there was a very good audio book I read years ago on nutrition, which was called Convenience is Killing Us. And you could argue that the convenience is really driving most people into a surveillance state. If it's really either be control yourself, or somebody else is going to control you. So on to part 2 now, which is really, really, really key, and try to simplify it as much as I can. But it took a long while for me to even get the basics of this. And it's really this not itch and the scratch. It's how we get into these loops where we don't feel fulfilled, and then our behavior just keeps going. And of course, Juvenal said, give them bread and circus and they will never revolt. So you're effectively giving someone what they want, and they're not going to go too far out of their comfort zone. So if we look at one thing I'm going to talk about, and I'll talk about over the coming months a bit more, is a compulsion loop. So what you have is compulsion loops is really in game design. So the game designers have found a way to pretty much get so many people addicted to games. I mean, you see people in suits get stuck playing Candy Crush for 6 hours on end. So, most people are vulnerable. And there's a really good TED talk where a lady talks about her addiction to the Strive pedometer, where it, almost ruined her life until she realized just how addicted to it she was. That effectively a compulsion loop is anticipation, action, then reward. And then you see in the inside that they have it in games where you kill monsters, you get rewards, and then you buy stuff, and you just continually go around that loop. And this is what happens in games continuously. So you never really get satisfied, which is why you're continuously on the loop, because this loop wouldn't be a loop. If you had a need, you went and did an action, you met that need, you would stop. So it wouldn't be a loop. It would literally be just a process or behavior. It becomes a loop when you never actually get the rewards never satisfying. And of course, you'll see, Starbucks obviously use this game design because pretty much I think most of the corporations saw how the game designers have been so successful that it's now really much in society that they do this thing. So people then get caught in these loops where they get this real good feeling about getting this reward, and they continue on. I mean, I know myself when I was playing years ago, playing this game on my phone, which was a quiz, and whether you would randomly select the prize, and whether it was 10,000 or 30,000, but it's credits. It's just a number on a screen. But I felt differently from the 30,000 and the 10,000. That makes no logical sense. But you understand that the unconscious mind is driving this. So what you end up with is what's known as a hedonic loop. Now, it sounds complex, but it's really simple, is that it generally doesn't matter what happens to most people, the ups and downs of life, their happiness tends to stay the same. And this is quite startling, but what you find is that there is a baseline of about, in the US, I think it's $75,000 per year, that if you meet that baseline, you've got your needs met. And much more above that doesn't make people any happier. And what you see is that, if you're under that and if you're in poverty, then obviously it would be very... Right, so I was just pausing there to mute someone. So the studies, when they look at lottery winners versus people in accidents, what happens is that these are life-changing events, but when they measure people's happiness, after a few years, people are back to the baseline. And this is very hard for a lot of people to digest, but this is really what I think it was Abraham Lincoln said, that you're happy or sad, the rest are details. But I think the main point to look here is that when you do something that gives you a reward, if you do that again, often you'll need more of that reward to get the same buzz. This explains the megalomaniacs, because they're not really ever getting fulfilled in life. They really don't meet their purpose. 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion is never enough. It's this hungry ghost which has no throat, that doesn't matter how much they consume, they're never satisfied, because they really haven't met their purpose in life, in my opinion. So what you're seeing is this constant, it's like a drug addiction, and and they tend to destroy people's lives in their pathway. Excuse me. Now, one other thing to talk about is compulsion loops. Again, it sounds complex, but it's not. It's just this loop that people go around that's addictive. Now, one of the biggest ways to create a compulsion loop is actually to withdraw. So
Claudia.
Okay, the quickest way a lot of the game designers get addiction within their users or engagement is they create a rewarding activity. Then what they do is they remove the reward or the feeling that was got in number one, and then they offer a clear way to restore the reward. Now think about lockdowns. Okay, life is pretty much, people's life day to day is rewarding activity. That was removed. Okay, and then people were told the only way out is to do X, Y, Z. That would have created a huge motivation to do whatever was given as the way out of that problem. Now, one of the game designers said, for those just out for pleasure, this 1, 2, 3 may be enough, but not for those out for mastery and development. So those that need more to life than just these pleasures would actually see through this. So those basic needs we've gone through a number of times, which is people need to be socially accepted. People want to be part of groups. We naturally form communities. We want to influence others. We want to make a positive impact on the world. We want to have safety, protect ourselves and those around us. And we want to bond to partners. So if you remove these from people and you give them the illusion of getting these, this sort of false fix, people are going to live an addictive life. And it's going to be this error in the cognitive pathway where they think, for me, it was like cream cake equals feeling good, you know, or feeling fulfilled, etc., or feeling love, all those things. Now, you eat 10, 20, whatever, you never feel it. It's an itch you can't scratch. And it's very, very key. So what you'll see is a lot of society now is driven by these false fixes and these compulsion loops where the wants are not meeting the needs. And this is why you're seeing such strong behavior. And the reason that I'm going through this again is just to go on to this next slide, that what you're going to see, and it takes a little bit of time to really digest this next slide, is that effectively in the middle, this is right action, as it's known in Zen. So this is really to have a balanced sense of self, to have control, to feel safe, and to be at oneness. If we don't have these, so if these needs are not met, we tend to then seek. So then we seek approval, we seek control, we seek security, and we seek separation. Now, what happens is that then you'll see people's behavior is trying to get as many likes on Facebook. People then just have lots of controlling behavior to try and control the situation. They will try and be over secure. So they have, 10 burglar alarms and all these various things, or they seek separation. Now, obviously, if you're balanced in these, then your action would be right. You would choose the correct course of action. There is also a polar that people will sometimes push against this, where they actually unconsciously seek disapproval. And this will be, the naughty kid at school, etc., or to be controlled. Now, this is very interesting because the megalomaniacs are out to control people, but there's an awful lot of people that want to be controlled. So you've got a mutually beneficial relationship there. Only when these people come into the center and they have control back over their life will they not have the need to be controlled. So you'll see this, the lock will often find its key. The same thing with the feeling safe, it has its polar opposite. So what you'll see is that very much this is the wanting, the seeking. And this type of behavior, in fact, is the very thing that stops you getting what you want or what you need. Because people that seek approval are obviously, they come across as, and we all do it in certain contexts. I've been seeing these behaviors in myself, and it's quite startling when you see, why am I doing this? Am I doing this for the right action? Am I doing this because I want approval? Why am I doing this? Am I doing this because it's the right thing to do, or doing this because I want to control situations? So, this control thing, you'll see the megalomaniacs are doing so much of it in the world at the moment. But this slide we're going to expand on in coming weeks. So that was part A and part B, and I'm sure that's stimulated a lot of questions, but hopefully some realization. So in summary, most content is free. If you would like to support us, please either donate or attend a workshop. If you want to help support the project, you can do so here. We have a all-day workshop coming up on the 24th of September where I'm going to be going depth into a lot of this behavior stuff. And you can reach me at info@reachingpeople.net, and you can see the videos. This will be edited and put up on the website YouTube channel. Thank you. I'm going to open up for Q&A.